Magic mushrooms could hold a cure for depression.
We can't call them magic mushrooms anymore. My stepson's very depressed. Here's some magic mushrooms. Take this seriously, doctor. Medical trials have shown that psychedelics are at least as good as big pharma drugs when it comes to handling depression. Why then do they remain illegal?
50 years ago, psychedelic drugs were at the center of America's counterculture.
It's no coincidence that those drugs were at the center of a counterculture because they affect the way that you perceive reality. I've had some experience with psychedelics, and though I would never publicly endorse any illegal activity at all, my personal recollection of using those controlled substances is it altered the way that I saw myself and my ego. Now, obviously, I took it in a rather reckless and untutored, unguided way. But I can see and recall even now as a man in recovery from drug addiction that those kind of experiences under the correct tutelage could be used to guide me away from certain patterns and behaviours. And microdosing, which is what is suggested might have a positive impact on depression and anxiety, could alter the way that you see reality. And the way that you see reality for your personal and empirical purposes is reality.
Today, the DEA restricts psychedelics as Schedule I drugs with no currently accepted medical use and a high potential for abuse.
It's interesting to watch even the transition between like that famous Woodstock-looking footage of people lounging around all happy and dopey and the prejudices and cultural baggage that that carries over to these heavily emblematic icons, US Justice Department and like the strips of information here on the news. We're dealing with how to curate and corral cultural space, how reality operates. My personal belief is that many substances have been controlled precisely because they alter the way that people see reality. The only way you can control a society, and make no mistake, the word government is a synonym for control, is if you manage people's perceptions. If you start introducing agents that mean that people see reality differently, have different priorities, have personal epiphanies about the nature of love, family, their priorities, their willingness to subjugate their personal selves to an economic system that may not necessarily reward them, then it's very difficult to control and govern and manage a society. It's no coincidence that wisdom traditions have long cherished plant medicines as a potential portal to other realms and dimensions of reality. And remember, if you think that that kind of language sounds a bit wacky and crazy, other dimensions of reality, the alternative is yet more preposterous, that you and I, as individual human beings, have the exact amount of senses to the exact degree that they can ever be used, and the exact amount of intelligence and consciousness to encompass all potential realities. That's more absurd. Everything you can see, everything you can measure and touch, that's all there is. What? So it's not possible that in the limitlessness of space, there are sensory instruments that could detect levels of reality that are inaccessible to us now, and even more significantly, that beyond the sensory and material world, there are layers of reality that are too subtle for us to even detect. We know already that different animals have a different experience of reality to us. We know that there are subtler forms of energy at play, and it's likely that psilocybin and other psychedelics allow us to access experiences, frequencies, vibrations, realities that are otherwise inaccessible. And the fact that that has a positive effect on our mental health is hardly surprising.
But Piers Chapin believes they saved her life.
It was very profound. It was very refreshing.
For more than a decade, Piers struggled with severe depression. Then a nurse practitioner sent her to a revolutionary treatment at Johns Hopkins University Med Center in Baltimore, using psilocybin, a key ingredient in hallucinogenic drugs. Within hours, she felt relief.
I was really happy. I was seeing things a lot differently for the first time in a long time.
Isn't that incredible? And isn't it also, too, continually surprising that what's required for a subject to enter into the mainstream debate are these kind of peculiar gatekeepers to be appeased, that it has to go through these kind of trials and this has to be done. Now, I'm not like some mad, loon, goon, hippie new age twit that says, why don't we all just wander off into the meadows and trust our luck? Humanity has already been through that experiment and it's brought us here. But what I suppose I'm suggesting is that our economic systems are so deeply inculcated and the imperatives of those systems are so blindly obeyed that we ignore vast swathes of reality, of our nature of potential solutions in order to maintain systems that can't necessarily serve us because they are about the service of hierarchical elites rather than addressing the problems of a diverse and varied and disparate population, i.e. like this individual. She has a little bit of a go with the old psilocybin, and with hours depression drops away. What possible reason is there then to not continue this exploration and to prioritise the well-being and health of individuals like this one and all the other countless individuals suffering from mental health problems, which, by the way, a scholar such as Mark Fisher would say should be regarded as a social issue rather than an individual issue because it's caused by social conditions, i.e. in times of economic crisis or social crisis you see a rise in mental health problems, but it's always treated like it's an individual problem because if you started to address it as a social problem, what would you have to change? Society rather than the individual. We are on, with revelations like the UFO stuff coming out from the Pentagon and this kind of thing entering the mainstream debate, we're at a kind of pivotal moment where we could say, why don't we put these new revelations into the current machine that materializes, rationalizes, commodifies everything? Or could we, in this time of crisis, after this time of hibernation, lockdown, breakdown, start looking at genuine alternatives, new ways of treating individuals, new ways of treating the collective?
This is one of a number of recent trials reviving some of the most controversial psychiatric research of the 1950s and 60s.
After receiving a small dose of LSD, they're confused and undisciplined.
After receiving a small dose of LSD, they're beginning to question whether or not being in the army was a good choice for them as individuals. Other attitudes that might alter are your willingness to cooperate with systems that don't directly benefit you and perhaps have never been intended to directly benefit you, more likely to subjugate and control you. So whilst I'm not endorsing the recreational use of any substances, and me as a man in recovery, for me, all mind-altering substances are off the agenda one day at a time, permanently. I can see that there is a huge need, not only with regard to mental health, but with our perception generally, for change, a change of perception, a change in the way we see reality.
Around 40,000 patients worldwide were treated with psychedelics for everything from alcoholism to schizophrenia. That all stopped when governments around the world began to ban recreational drugs.
And why do they ban recreational drugs? You have to ask yourself this question. Does the government have as its number one priority your health and safety, or does the government have as its number one priority control? Just look at the last 20 years or 50 years or 100 years of history and look at the kind of decisions that have been made and look at how you can see those decisions playing out in reality now. Is the government about the protection of a population or the control of a population? You can ask similar questions about big business. Is their intention to provide services for their customers that improve their lives, or is their priority to increase profits? Sometimes there's an overlap in those interests. Hey, if we provide a product that improves the quality of life, we'll benefit. But that is not the priority, is it?
The latest results are eye-opening. Hopkins has treated 360 patients. For most, just 1 or 2 sessions lifts their depression for months on end.
Just 1 or 2 pills may be able to replace daily medications for months or years on end.
Hold on a minute. So they can have 1 or 2 pills that grow naturally on the planet, or we could manufacture a lifetime's worth of drugs. Which one makes more economic sense?
We're trying to provide a setting that is supportive, that's warm, that's nurturing, where the patient can feel safe and supported and free and able to open up, really.
Dr. Robin Carhart-Harris, he came on Under the Skin. You should subscribe to that on Luminary if you don't already. He has been doing experiments, and these are some things that I think are interesting. When you conventionally treat depression, and full disclosure, I've taken medication before for anxiety, depression, bipolar. I've been diagnosed as all those things at different times in my life, and I've taken some of the drugs that are in this list that are described as SSRIs, like Prozac, citalopram, forgive the pronunciation, escitalopram and sertraline, I don't know any of those, right, except Prozac, are the drugs doctors will reach for first when treating depression and anxiety. They are thought to work on the brain's stress system, muting responses, which can take the edge off, making painful emotions easier to bear. but they don't necessarily help people feel great, and for some, the drugs blunt all emotions, both positive and negative. On the other hand, psilocybin seems to work on receptors in the brain associated with reordering the way we think about things. After psychedelic therapy, participants reported feeling recalibrated, reset, like they haven't for years, and enjoying life. They get more at the root cause of suffering rather than plastering over or muting their systems. So the pharmaceutical model often involves muting, repressing, controlling symptoms, where the, let's call it the natural, plant-based psychedelic pathway involves the exploration of networks, synaptic networks, and the creation of new connections. It's obvious, isn't it, even from the perspective of an observer, that one set of cultural values is continually deployed by systems such as ours, the repression of the symptoms, quiet please, this kind of mentality is prevalent. But the exploration and awakening, there's consequences for that, because if you awaken people, you might awaken them to the possibility that they're not living their lives in the best possible way and that they could be better served by a society that had different priorities.
So these are the results from the study so far. You can see 1 week post-treatment, you can see that virtually every patient shows some decrease in their depressive symptoms.
It's mad that you've got to jump through all these hoops and do all these graphs. Look, I'll show you there. Look, if you follow to this point, then you realise that you're actually not separate from God. Look, that your consciousness itself is God realising itself through physical form. Look, and love, you can just see there is the answer. Hold on a minute, have you just drawn a dick and some balls? Oh, sorry about that, I've taken quite a lot of acid.
The researchers believe that psilocybin increases the connectivity of parts of the brain. It's speculated that in depression, the brain gets stuck into repetitive negative patterns of thinking.
So if we can introduce a kind of flexibility into the mind and into the brain, then perhaps that could help us shift an individual out of that rut that they've become stuck in.
You can see, can't you, a correlative between those two graphs, the psilocybin image and the placebo image. Consider society is made up of comparable connections, that we are all connected to one another, that we forego potential connections because of our conditioning. We forego mental explorations because of our conditioning. We don't just wander up to people and present them with flowers and tell them that we love them unless we're crazy, you know, like that we have been ordered into sort of conformist little passageways of potential existence, and most people aren't happy with that anymore. I'm very well aware that people watch these videos feeling inhibited, prohibited, trapped by life, that they can't be who they really are because of economic pressures, because of the way they've been treated, because of a reality that's been prescribed to us that is incomplete and bears the hallmarks of a culture that is not your friend but is your jailer.
Professor David Nutt is calling for a change in rules.
I like to imagine that instead of that being an image like projected there behind that woman, is there someone behind a screen who's producing this news show going, oh, fucking hell, I said don't mention David Nutt!
So that research can begin into whether magic mushrooms could hold a cure for depression.
We can't call them magic mushrooms anymore. My stepson's very depressed. Here's some magic mushrooms. Take this seriously, doctor.
The problem is that because this drug is called a controlled drug, you need a special license to hold it, to manufacture it, to use it. These licenses cost quite a bit of money. They take a year to get.
It's weird, isn't it? Because like all of the legislation around these substances is in itself a kind of an illusion. The law is like a magical spell that's been drawn up. Whee! That's illegal now. Whee! We can't do that. Now, obviously, there are many, many laws that seem to be the application through legislature of common sense. Don't hurt people, don't kill people, don't take people's stuff. Yeah, we all get that. But controlling people's substances, acting as a gatekeeper to people's consciousness and their experience of reality, has always struck me as a kind of an absurd process. And I know David Nutt believes the same thing. I've had the privilege of interviewing him before. I question, when a substance is controlled, is it for your benefit or is it for their benefit?
You were a drug czar advisor to the government, and you were effectively fired in 2009 because of controversial comments that you made, where you said that LSD and ecstasy were actually less harmful than alcohol. So perhaps you've come up against this sort of, I don't know, I guess a barrier before, in the sense that people are skeptical because magic mushrooms can be a very damaging drug.
It becomes clear under scrutiny that alcohol is permitted because it is a deadening drug that deadens your aspirations, other than a brief moment where you might think you're really, really hard or something. And drugs like psilocybin increase this sense of wonder and power and curiosity and mystery. You don't need to investigate the machinery of the state and the relationship of the corporate state with big business to see that the way that legislation is organised is not for the benefit of your individual freedom, but for the expedience of their mutual agenda. So if it's beneficial for loads of people to take psilocybin in order to heal depression and anxiety and to experience an awakening into the true nature of reality, but it's not profitable, or it might cause people to be inquisitive about the way that power is organised, then it's pretty clear the way the legislative pendulum will swing. Hopefully now, at a time when we can have broad and open conversations about individual and collective freedom, we will have a chance to reorganise culture, to reorganise opinion, and to voice, express explicitly the kind of societies that we would like to live in and organise, and to recognise that ultimately power lies with the majority, but requires us to act collectively, commensurately, collegiately, with one another against elite powers that seek to control us through myriad means.
Well, I don't think magic mushrooms are damaging. There's no one's ever died of magic mushrooms, and 8,000 people a year die of alcohol in this country.
Poor old David Nutt, he's absolutely knackered. He's been having this conversation for 20 years. Look, I'm just telling you that clearly magic mushrooms aren't as bad for you as alcohol. Look, there's the alcohol deaths, there's the magic mushrooms. Yeah, but not as many people are taking magic mushrooms. It's really clear that tobacco's bad for you, alcohol's bad for you, sugar's bad for you, all the processed foods we eat are all causing us cancer. No one's doing anything like that because it's in alignment with the interests of the powerful. Poor old Professor David Nutt has to sit for interview after interview going, look, I'm telling you, magic mushrooms aren't bad for you. Yes, but I will repeat, your surname is Nutt. Yes, I suppose it is, yes.
But I guess, again, it goes down to the LSD and ecstasy argument. It is still a Class A drug. That's how it's been classified.
They're not born Class A drugs. Hello, I'm a Class A drug. Like, that's applied externally. This drug is Class A. It's not innate or inherent within the thing.
They are Class A drugs, they shouldn't be Class A drugs, and they shouldn't be controlled the way they are, because what we're doing is trying to stop young people using them, and we're failing. But we are stopping scientists researching them, and therefore we're stopping the possibility of new treatments emerging.
It's almost like people don't want to explore drugs that may not be profitable and would be difficult to patent in favour of the less effective but easily patented and profitable drugs that are currently available. I suppose you yourself would have to make a decision about what you think the agenda of Big Pharma in alliance with the state is. Does history suggest these are your chums and buddies over there at Pfizer? Or do you have a more cynical outlook? I wouldn't seek to influence you either way. All I want for you is the maximum amount of freedom and connection within my own limitations. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you do, please like, subscribe, comment. I read the comments. Damn you. No, I like them. They're mostly really nice. Thanks. I appreciate them. Yeah, I know. There's loads of things to think about. Subscribe to my mailing list over at russellbrand.com. Let's stay connected. Why don't we start to cultivate the kind of culture and reality that we would like to see realised? And we can do that, first of all, through synaptic connections together. Ding!